Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. This has been an interesting week for running. Can't wait to get into it. And it is Friday, so I'm recording on my normal day, a little later in the afternoon than normal. But before we get to the Substack and the recap, I'm 2 days away if you count, well, I guess if you count today and tomorrow, which really it's just tomorrow. It's Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday is the Buffalo Marathon. So getting pretty excited about that. Tomorrow I'll be posting some clips and things like that. We'll be doing some stuff on Instagram. Probably throw that stuff on Substack as well. Just as we go to get the bib, it's about a 2-hour drive. My son, my daughter, and I are all going up to Buffalo to pick up the bib early in the morning. So, if you want to follow some of that stuff outside the podcast on the Substack or Instagram, those are the two places where you're going to see most of the content. But check that out. I'm going to try to, all during this Buffalo Marathon weekend, post pictures and photos and things like that. The race starts at, what time's the race start? 6:30. There is going to be tracking. You can look that up. My bib number, which will get posted through the socials and stuff, I'm pretty sure it's 13:35 for the Buffalo Marathon. So we're doing the full marathon. So check that out. Let's get into the Substack. As always, you can jump on uncredible.me and check out the full Substack. Normally, we jump ahead and look at what's going on next week, and I am going to do that, but I decided on kind of a whim to write an additional article this week, and it was sort of by accident. I was, because I haven't been logging as many miles, I kind of decided I would just go ahead and write a preview, like my thoughts on what's coming. And so I wrote an article called the Buffalo Marathon preview. I don't think I called it that. I'm not sure what the title is. It's the funny thing is it's going to be on screen because I have the image, but basically when I wrote that article, my nerves were, I'm calm, like that. I was kind of like, and I still am kind of thrown by this fact that I'm not really nervous about this race. Maybe those nerves will start kicking in tomorrow when we head up to Buffalo, and certainly in the morning on Sunday. But this week has been strange. Reduced the mileage. And in the past, when I've reduced my mileage and started to taper, it really kind of like gave me an angst. Like, man, what if I'm not ready? What if I'm not ready? I don't feel that way this time. And it's its own sort of disconcerting because it's almost like I should feel nervous and I don't. And then it makes me go into this little, I wouldn't even say spiral, but this thought process where I'm like, am I forgetting something? Like, is there something I should be afraid of that I'm not, or something I should be nervous of that I'm not? I think a big part of it is I am starting to feel a lot better physically because of this taper, which again, I think I mentioned it last week. So glad that I did 2 weeks of a taper. But another part of it is there's not a whole lot of the process of getting my bib, getting to the race. A lot of that stuff, I mean, now that I've done half marathon, full marathon, I've been to different race scenarios. That part of it doesn't concern me as much. And as I look back to like the Winter Warrior half marathon I did in January, travel in theory shouldn't be an issue because, we drove through pretty much the nastiest blizzard I've ever driven. It wasn't the nastiest blizzard I've ever driven in, but it was the nastiest blizzard I've ever driven that far in. It was awful. So, and we made it and everything worked out all right. So not really worried about the travel aspect. And because my first marathon was sort of untrained and it wasn't unplanned, but I didn't train specifically for a marathon. I got a 5-hour, I had a goal, but I didn't really train for the goal. I just had a number. This time I've really, set out, made a plan and worked towards it and been very strategic in how I've done my training. And it's been a 20-week training plan. I feel like I got all I could out of this training block, to the point where there were multiple times where I had to back off due to cold, like getting sick. There's 1 week specifically. When this is all over, I'll probably have a social media post where I kind of look back on the training and where the little blips in my mileage were. But there was one week 9, week 10, somewhere in there, it was pretty much dead in the middle, where it dropped off because of the cold. So, and then these last, I'd say 4 or 5 weeks have been overuse. I wouldn't say injury, but soreness that I've been dealing with. So I kind of feel like I pushed my body as far as I could push it for where I'm at right now in terms of my athletic capability. I have significantly improved what I consider to be my easy pace. We'll see how that translates on Sunday, but right now I feel pretty good about it. So all of that combined just kind of has me going, I'm fairly certain, unless I get injured or something crazy happens, I'm going to PR, which is anything under 5 hours. I'm also cautiously, I don't want to say pessimistic. I'm cautiously pessimistic that I'm probably going to land around 4 hours and 20 minutes. So I've kind of already accepted that I might not hit my goal of sub 4, kind of have a range where I'm kind of like, that's probably where I'm at right now. And if I hit like a 420, I'm happy with that. I'm good with it. So I kind of talk about all of that in this article that I wrote this past week, just kind of looking ahead. And I'll follow this up next week with a Buffalo Marathon recap. Normally I would put the header image up for next week's article, but I don't know how it's, we could drive up there, car breaks down, and I don't even start the race. That's a whole different story than if I drive up there and let's say I hit a PR and I beat my goal of 355 and I end up at 350. That would be a different article. Or, I sprain my ankle at mile 15 and have to sort of navigate that difficulty. Or maybe I don't finish. Whatever the situation is, I don't know what it's gonna look like. So I can't really make a header image for it until I know what's gonna happen. So next week, look for that Buffalo Marathon recap post. More than likely, I'll drop that. Our typical time is Wednesday, and we also have, I think this is going to be our last throwback article. I was looking at it. There's a handful of articles that I'm not sure if I'm gonna bring them out just yet or at all. I did some fiction stuff that I'm actually pretty proud of. I like it. Like it's creative for me. Like I liked what I did with those, but trying to get that to translate to audio, I don't feel like I have the technical capability to do that. So I don't want to put those articles into an audio format until I can really make it what I want to make it. So suffice it to say, the idea of those articles were to be short, thought-provoking articles that were fiction and fun to read. And in my mind, I have this picture of what they should sound like. And I know right now it's not just me reading it. It's going to have sound effects, subtle sound effects, and things like that. I don't know if I'll ever get around to doing those. Those will stay on medium.com. Maybe someday those will make their way to the Substack. But I think this next Thursday article will be the last throwback article. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do after that for Thursdays. But it's called Before Your Memories Disappear. And basically what it is, excuse me. Basically what it is an article where I kind of just lay out the hardware specs of what you would need to transfer. I think I do 2 types of video recording from the 90s. I might touch on, I'm pretty sure I touch on slides as well, but basically walk people through if family members or you yourself have old media, high 8 Sony tapes or small VHS tapes that don't fit in a VHS player. I go through kind of the cheap way of converting those because there is a market out there, just an expensive market of mail your tapes in, we'll convert them for you. And it's like thousands. It's crazy money. You can I think I can safely say, and it depends on what mediums you're working with. I think I can safely say within $200 to $300, maybe cheaper, you can have all the tech that you would possibly need to convert pretty much any old VHS tape. I'm not sure I don't know how you do reel, but I mean, I've done pretty much anything that you would have recorded in the late 80s, early 90s. I have the ability to do that with a few. And I say $200 to $300 because some of this stuff is becoming more vintage, antique, rare. To find it functional is difficult, but I got my VCR, which I have sitting on my desk right now because I think it's a cool little thing to have here. It still functions. It was $6 at Salvation Army. So depending on how you acquire some of this technology, you might be able to get it way cheaper. But the $200 to $300, I'll tell you, the most expensive piece of equipment I have is a Sony Hi8 Sony recorder, which it's a fun little old thing. It's the only way I could find to actually play those tapes and get a digital output. So that was like $150, or maybe it was $100. I don't know. That was hard to find, and it's very difficult to find a functioning Sony Hi8 player, like a VHS. It's not a VHS player though. It's for Sony tapes. Those old tiny little tapes. They kind of look like old cassette tapes, but once I got all the technology together, it worked fine. But I had to Facebook Marketplace that piece, and it was some guy's grandfather who passed away, and he was just getting rid of it. So again, depending on how you acquire this stuff, and if you're patient, if you go to eBay, you could be upwards of $500, and it could get expensive. But the basic tools you need are pretty cheap. And listen, I've written a couple articles on the Substack about converting old media, and you want to preserve those memories, okay? And what I'm concerned with, particularly with that generation, is they're susceptible to scams and things like that, and they're not very, listen, I don't want to be ageist or whatever, but they're not really good with computers and technology. My generation and the one coming behind me, there's an education gap, okay? So like, if my parents leave their VHS tapes to their grandchildren, which would be like my kids aren't going to be able to convert them. And that's great that opens up a market for people who are capable of doing this, but it also inflates the price of it. And so I'm just trying to put that information out there for anybody who maybe has a pile of VHS tapes in the back that they want to convert. This article will kind of walk you through the steps to get there. Don't know how much longer that technology is going to remain as cheap as it is right now, because one of the things that's getting harder and harder to do is actually play analog, RCA, whatever you call it. But in order to play those old things, you got to have a TV to connect to, and a lot of televisions don't have the ability to do that. And so it's getting harder and harder to do that. So who knows, with USB-C taking over, I don't know if like one of the converter tools that I used is going to work anymore. But the information's there. Both those articles are coming up, Buffalo Marathon recap and Before Your Memories Disappear. And again, I just want to remind you that I posted a brand new article, special article this week, the Buffalo Marathon preview, which I think is good for any new runners who are thinking about running their first or second marathon. It gives you an idea of the feeling of what's going on before you enter the marathon. And as always, those are on Uncredible Readings on Spotify. If you check out that podcast, you can actually listen. You don't have to read these articles. You can listen to them. I read them. I do the editing. It's my voice. I don't use an AI voice for that. I think it's important that I personally read my own articles. So let's jump into our weekly update and look at week 19 of marathon training. So for the sake of time today, I'm going to kind of speed through this, and because this was basically a taper week, there's not a whole lot to talk about in this weekly update. And because I've had a little more time with my reduction in running, I actually spent a lot of time on our in the news Uncredible take section. I'm doing something I've never done before. Well, maybe one time before, where I'm going to actually take clips and drop them in here. So I've done a lot of extra work this week on the podcast to get some added little technical things. We'll see how it turns out. But I also spent a lot of time and got a lot of content to talk about. So let's zip through this weekly update. So this is my final week of training. I guess technically this should be week 20. I didn't change that in my notes. So this is week 20 of training, which is the final week. It was a 20-week training block. And I'm looking at my notes right now. It's been easy. I'll breeze through this. Saturday, 1.5 easy. Sunday, 3.25 easy. Monday, 3, easy. Tuesday, 1.5, easy. So it's just been either 3 or 1 all week long. And I also want to say that all of these runs, I put easy on here, but all these runs I've been trying to just let my body decide how fast I run. And a couple of these runs, like I think maybe either Monday or Wednesday, I was feeling really good. And I was just trying to do a pace. I'm not picking a slow pace or a fast pace. And my running comfortably pace early on, I'm just going to say early on because that seems to be, who knows when we get into 15, 20 miles, seems to be right around 9:30. I'm not breathing heavy. My muscles aren't straining. It's a good, safe place. And that's kind of why I keep saying I feel like I'm kind of on pace for like a 4 hour and 20 minute marathon here. Because there's fall off. B, I'm probably going to go fast early by accident and then trail off at the end. So what I'm really hoping for is I'm really hoping that I can like run the whole way. So in my first marathon at mile 15 or 16, I've mentioned this over and over in this podcast, but at mile 15 and 16, I fell apart. My legs started to cramp up, hamstrings were sore, couldn't stretch, and just walked for a solid 4 or 5 miles before I could really get my gumption back. And it was extremely frustrating. So I'm hoping to avoid that. I hope I've done the training and I have the fueling side of things set up to where that doesn't happen. But I'm really hoping to really just enjoy this marathon and take it all in. So apologize. That's going to happen a lot in this episode because that cold is still lingering a little bit. But on that note, I will say my cold does feel significantly better. And I think by Sunday morning, I'm going to be feeling fine. Another big win for me is about Wednesday. I think it was about Wednesday. My hip and my right shin, both right hip and right shin, finally started feeling, I'm not sure if good's the word, but not bad. So I work nights and some days I would wake up and it would be hurting when I woke up. Some days it would be hurting like 3 a.m. towards the end of my shift. And some days it would be after my run in the morning and it would start to hurt. But it was hurting consistently up until I would say Wednesday, or it was Wednesday or Thursday, feeling great. And so great, in fact, that I was like, let's keep this going. And I backed off. I think my Wednesday 3 miles was really easy. Like I kept it super easy. So my takeaway this week this was really just like my final week of training, but it was a taper, like a real taper week. And it's really the first time I've taken my taper week seriously. My takeaway is if you're a new runner and you're trying to do a half marathon, your first 10K, your first marathon, listen to the people who are telling you to take your taper week seriously. So before my marathon, I ran 10 miles the Sunday before just to see if I still had it in me. And everyone I know who runs was like, dude, you didn't need to do that. Now, I could have, it didn't kill me, but I was already in a lot of pain. I had a lot of overuse. And you're not going to lose, well, I can't say this definitively, but I don't think you're going to lose what you've built over a 10 or 15 week, or in my case, 20 week training block. You're not going to lose it in that last week. You're going to feel better. And I can confirm, at least right now, I feel a lot better. Like I don't feel bad at all. So taper week has really helped. Won't know for sure until the race is over and how I'm feeling 15, 20 miles in. But I can say day to day, overall, I'm physically feeling strong, and I'm hoping that'll translate to Buffalo. One other side note I'll throw in here before we get into our uncredible take on the news. I've made it a conscious effort to increase my sleep this week. I was going to do this for 2 weeks, and it just didn't work out last week. I talked about that in the podcast last week as to why. It's just different things popped up. But I've increased my sleep this week by 1 hour per day on average. And I'm pretty sure that's been a significant factor in the feeling better muscularly in terms of my shin, my calf, my right hip, all that. I think that sleep has helped. And I'm going to try going forward into my next training block, which will start Monday after the marathon, I'm going to try to make that a priority for my next training block is going to be 8 weeks long. And then we'll be doing my next marathon will be July 25th. So just wanted to throw that in there because I think that's an important part of training that I've been kind of failing at. I don't prioritize sleep as much as I should, partly because I'm a third shifter. So all this training can get derailed, I think, if you're not sleeping well. So that kind of wraps up our weekly update on the training. So let's turn our attention to the news and our Uncredible take. We have a lot to talk about here. Now, when I say we have a lot to talk about, I had a whole plan for this particular. I haven't done a whole lot of in the news stuff lately. I've kind of been staying away from it, but I got this idea like maybe towards the end of last week, and I didn't have time to put it all together the way I wanted to. But I put together this whole idea of doing a rewind and looking back at the Iran war, going back to like the first week, a little over a week, and listening to what people were saying then. And that idea was kind of stewing in my head. And then the news came out that Thomas Massie lost Kentucky. And I honestly hadn't really been following that race. I like Thomas Massie a lot. Never really thought that he would get removed from office because of Kentucky, and he's been the incumbent for a long time. And he's been, in my opinion, he's been doing great things with the Epstein files. And, he's just been on the right side of all the issues that I would be concerned about against this war. So I guess I really wasn't taking seriously some of the comments where it was like, oh, they're trying to primary Thomas Massie. It's like, okay, whatever, right? I just kind of roll my eyes. Then I get the news that he lost his race, and I didn't believe it at first. And then I saw his speech, his what do they call it when you give up? His whatever, the speech where they say that concession, where he concedes the race. And I was like, dude really lost. And just the whole story is so profound to think about how far we've come in a matter of like 2 years from the election to now, and how like what was the base and the supporting cast that got Trump elected is now enemy number one in the Republican Party. And the two things that stood out to me, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I'm not really studied up on it. It just kind of was something I felt the need to talk about. First of all, there's a clear divide between boomers and the rest of the country on politics. And if you do the research on young versus old in that particular race, it's kind of wild. And you're going to see this when we get into the rest of this segment. But there's very major difference between how the boomer generation wants to dictate and run this country and how the next generation wants to run it. And what we're seeing potentially in both parties, I don't follow the Democratic Party that much, but what it appears that we're seeing in the Republican Party is it's not a split. It's a difference in how we perceive what it means to be a Republican. And I say I'm not a Republican. I'm not registered Republican. I've been independent outside the Republican Party for quite a while. I think the last time I was registered Republican was when I was hoping to help. I think it was Trump's first primary in I don't know when that would have been, 2015. I don't know when the primary was for the 2016 election, but I wanted to vote for Rand Paul back then. So I became a Republican just for that purpose. When he lost and Trump won, I immediately back out. So it's interesting to me because even back then, back when I even first got into politics, and since then I've gotten kind of out of it, not really following it. There was the Ron Paul revolution, and it just didn't seem like it was going anywhere. And this was the first time in a long time listening to Thomas Massie's concession speech and seeing some of the poll results of what happened there. I was like, oh, it's still coming. Like this thing that I remember appearing to be very popular when I was into politics, which was the libertarian movement. There's sort of like a libertarian, conservative libertarian, like less concerned about the social issues and more concerned about like like things that are going on in the world, less war hawkish, if that's the term. I don't even know what that means, if I'm being honest, but I know who it means. The news report coming out of this is that if you're on Massie's side, the news report is the Israel lobby bought this election, and if you're on the opposition side, Massie failed, and that part of the party isn't as big as it thinks it is. It's kind of like the two different takes on that issue. And my thing is, it's not people who support the war or who are for Israel or against Israel, or I don't think that's the divide. The divide appears to be between boomer Republicans and the other generation of Republicans. And I've said for a long time, and when I say I've said for a long time, I had a podcast back in early 2010s, 2013, 2014, 2015, might have trickled into 2016. I have to go back and check. I doubt it. Anyway, even back then when I was doing more of a religious political podcast, I was calling this issue out back then, but back then the millennials were kind of like a mockery. And so anytime they entered into the political conversation, it was sort of like a joke, and there was no end in sight of boomers running the country. Now we're getting close to that point where two things are happening. One, the boomers are aging out. They can't continue to run the country anymore. Now, I'm sure we have probably another 10 to 15 years of them dominating the political landscape, at least at the federal level. I don't know what it looks like at a state by state level, but the other problem is the boomer generation, the world they once knew and are familiar with and comfortable with doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist. And, we're in a world now of AI, drones. The technology is just outside of their capacity to really grasp and understand. We're talking about AI farms and technology farms, and in order for the United States or any country to be on the winning side, so to speak, like I don't mean winning political side, I mean winning in the terms of like keeping the country going, like being successful, you have to understand these things. And I think we're seeing this point where nobody's buying the world. Like they're trying to sell and lead in a world that doesn't exist anymore. And that's why it doesn't make any sense to a large portion of the country that's just like, dude, like, no, like we don't agree with that. And so like the tough guy talk when you're talking about a war, it doesn't hit the same, because this generation and the generations that follow aren't like we didn't go to World War II. We didn't go to Vietnam. Listen, Nam was before my time. I'm in my early 40s, and I did not know anything about Vietnam. The wars that I remember are the Iraq wars, the wars. I can't remember what it was called. The George H.W. Bush wars. I was really young for those. 9/11. These are the wars that I remember. And you can't keep referring back to the 70s to justify your wars anymore. Because most of the people who are paying the tax dollars and supporting it and fighting these wars, right? The people who are actually on the front lines, they're not your age. Your world is gone. It's history. I mean, you're still here, but we're at a point now where you're seeing that divide at a political level in a very real sense. And it was the first time in a long time that I thought, there's not a libertarian movement and not an anti-war movement. There is a generational, a non-boomer group of people that are going, yo, this is not gonna fly. And basically what the boomers are doing is they're flipping this. I'll have to look at this later because I've seen so much of it in a short period of time. But what you're seeing is the boomers, all they see for anyone who disagrees with them is anti-Semitism. Like the boomer Republicans, all they see is if you don't agree with them, you're an anti-Semite. And it's like, this is not a generation that understands the issues of World War II. We weren't alive then. It's, you talk about anything that happened pre-1980s, And this generation's we're not as connected to it as you are. And those are the reference points that they're going from, and those people are going away. There are new reference points now. And those reference points are Gaza, they're Lebanon, they're 9/11, they're a U.S. government, by the way, that a lot of people believe has been deceiving us since the 60s and 70s, which is your generation that's leading the country. There's a real issue. Like, there's an Epstein class that's not only rich and wealthy, but also of a different generation. And I have a feeling that what we just saw with the Thomas Massie situation is the beginning of probably something that's going to happen in both parties, where a non-boomer, I think that's the best way to delineate it, a non-boomer coalition in both parties is going to rise up. And it's going to look very different than what it's looked. The political landscape is going to look very different, thankfully, than what it has. However, it could get, thankfully, much better, or it could get much worse. I mean, you look at the extremes on the left and the extremes on the right, and it can get weird real quick. So the other thing I wanted to point out from this Thomas Massie loss, which I thought was kind of funny, was the weirdest propaganda point coming from like those people who were against Massie. It goes like this. Trump won that election and Massie lost it because he didn't run a good campaign, but Trump didn't cause Massie to lose that campaign. Massie did. So nobody is talking about how great a victory. I don't know who the other candidate was. I've heard his name mentioned, but I don't know him, never heard of him. Nobody is saying he ran a great campaign. Everybody's saying Trump pushed Massie out. Massie ran a bad campaign. It's like, whew. Like, if you were listening to the news media, you would think Trump just won a district in Kentucky, and you wouldn't have any idea that he was the president of the United States. Like, if you just walked into this, didn't know he was the president, and you just listened to these news stories, Trump won Kentucky. He ousted Massie. Trump didn't do anything. They'll say Trump's support, but it's like interesting that dynamic where it's like you want to give Trump the victory, but not give him the blame. And the other side of that is one of the classic Ronald Reagan Republican things was we don't infight. This is like what is this? Like this is the craziest thing I've seen in a long time. I don't pay that close attention to primary, but I don't remember the last time there was they've been saying that the most money ever was spent in terms of congressional House representative seats. This was the most money ever spent. So I guess nobody's seen anything like this, but it's wild. It is concerning that Massie was on the front, like literally the tip of the spear for the Epstein files at this point. And by the way, I did want to point out, I just used tip of the spear, and I was going to make a joke about that, and I decided I wasn't going to, and then I just used it. But that's another one of those propaganda phrases that I keep picking up on, tip of the spear. Okay. Okay. So I wanted to touch on that, but I didn't want that to make that the whole focus because we got a lot of clips to go through. What I thought would be fun, because I haven't done a lot of news stuff recently, is I'm going to shorten up our main topic, but we're going to broaden our in the news topic today. And I've been listening to a lot of talk about the Israel-Iran U.S. war. And I thought it would be fun to rewind the tape, so to speak, and go back to when the war first started and pull out some of the supporters of the war and see what they were saying and see if what they were saying makes sense today. And so I wrote in my notes, I don't know if you remember Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or anything like that, but they used to have a sticker or something on the case that would say, be kind and rewind. So what we're going to do today is we're going to rewind to March 10th, 2026. Now, for those who don't know, the Iran conflict, we'll call it, we won't say war, the Iran conflict began on February 28th, 2026. So this is 10 days after this war started, and we're going to look, most of the clips are going to be from an episode from Ben Shapiro, where he talks about the 4 lies of the war and the Iran war, 4 lies that you're being told about the Iran war. And I want to look at those lies and see if they actually were lies or not. And we're also going to look at Mark Levin I have a whole bunch of things to say about Mark Levin here in a minute because I've never listened to him before, and boy, that was yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. But we're gonna go back to this. It's the episode that both of these gentlemen put out on March 10th, 2026. Shapiro says it's 12 days into the war. When I looked up when did the war start, everything I got was February 28th. Shapiro keeps saying we're 12 days into this war, so I don't know timeline-wise how that could have come out on the 10th if it started on the 28th. Don't know if they're using different dates. Don't fully understand the date conflict there. So we're going to listen to a bunch of clips, and we're going to start with this episode. It's episode 2384 of the Ben Shapiro Show. You can find it on YouTube. I'll throw the link in the show notes, and I'm going to play these videos, and then I'll throw the edit in later. But I'm going to try to throw the clip up next to me and not over top of me. So we'll see if this works. If it doesn't, oopsies. But before I get into this on Spotify, this is called The 4 Lies of the Iran War, or something like that, or 4 Lies About the War. On YouTube, he says he's going to go over in his intro the 4 lies of the war. He lists them off, but ultimately, I think he forgets to either label or mention lie number 4. Lie number 4, which we're not going to talk about anyway, was Donald Trump does definitely have a plan, we swear. I'm not going to get into that because I had it in my notes, and I think it just gets into the weeds. I really want to focus on 2 particular aspects of these 2 podcasts, but let's look at clip number 1, and this is Ben Shapiro, lie number 1 that you're being told about the Iran war. This was March 10th, 2026.
These aren't just lies, they are insane lies. So let's start with lie number 1. This is a quagmire, an interminable, never-ending conflict doomed to catastrophe. We'll probably have to use nukes and all the rest. This is nuts. Can we be real about something for a second? We are 12 days into this war. 12 days. Not 12 years, like Vietnam. Not 12 months, like the Spanish-American War, which ended with the United States winning Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines from Spain. 12 days. About how long it takes cottage cheese to spoil in your fridge.
So, one thing I noticed listening to this episode, and I've listened to Ben Shapiro before, one thing I noticed is he is really prone to exaggerating his opposition's position in order to make his own case. So I don't know that he probably read it somewhere. So I'm sure there was something out there because Ben Shapiro tries to have some sort of source for everything he says. But I don't know that anybody was saying we need nukes to finish this war. But you notice what he said. He said this war is only 12 days old. It's not even as old. It's the cottage cheese thing. Man, he made so many jokes in this episode. If you go back and listen to them, they just don't land. They might have been funny back then, but like they just don't land, and they're kind of cringy now. But he swears that this is not going to be a quagmire. It's not going to go on and on and on. This is going to be short. Interestingly enough, I'm not going to show this clip specifically because it was mixed in with a bunch of other stuff, but there's a point where he shows a clip of Donald Trump describing the war as an excursion. And I looked up the word excursion, and an excursion is typically 1 day. So this is definitely not an excursion, but Ben Shapiro makes a big joke about it. Like, oh, it's like a little excursion, blah, blah, blah. Now that we're roughly 3 months in, we are on May 22nd. We're roughly 5 or 6 days away from this war being officially 3 months old. All of a sudden, what once was 12 days has become 3 months. And your cottage cheese is now spoiled like 8 times, since that's the joke. So, yeah, so lie number 1, this is a quagmire that could go on and on forever. I mean, yeah. Was it a lie? Now let's get into lie number 2.
Okay, lie number 2. Iran is doing great. They're outlasting us. They've never been stronger. They'll be able to stand up to us forever. You see this in the AI slop all over X. People legitimately making up videos that do not exist and pumping them out, showing Iran with nuclear age weaponry. Iran, basically with the weaponry that the aliens used in Independence Day. Well, no, actually, the war is going incredibly poorly for Iran. Actually, Iran is on its last legs. I should say last leg, because it turns out that Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader of Iran, reportedly is down to one leg. Apparently, the Israelis blew off the other one in that same strike that took out Mojtaba's dad.
So, oh man. There's two things here. First of all, he's right. I do remember what appeared to be AI videos of an underground tunnel of drones and missiles and just tunnels and tunnels and tunnels of missiles. I don't know if it's true. He said they were AI. I think he's right. There probably were. So the first half of this clip, I'm like, yeah, he's right. Iran, from a military standpoint, is not winning this war, right? No, I don't think anybody's claiming that Iran's winning the war. Back then, I don't know if anybody was claiming Iran was winning the war. Not in a combat version of the story. The Strait of Hormuz had not been blocked at this point. But there's also this point that he's trying to make that they're on their last leg. So he's saying two things at once. On the one side, he's saying Iran is outlasting the U.S. because they have more missiles. And if you remember back then, it was like they were shooting missiles at the Iron Dome, and it was sort of like, can they shoot enough missiles to where Israel runs out and then start hitting them or something to that effect? I'm not sure how that was all playing out, but that was kind of like the context of it. Then not too long after this, I think, I'm just going off the top of my head, I think that's when they started firing missiles at other countries as well around them to make it even worse. But yes, Iran militarily, he's right, is not standing toe-to-toe with the U.S. in any way, shape, or form. I don't think anyone's arguing that. Maybe back then they were. He didn't quote them, so who knows. But the other side of that, and he goes on, I couldn't show any more of the clip because he goes on to make some pretty crude jokes about the genitalia of that leader he's talking about, which is like, okay, Ben Shapiro. Which, by the way, he mocks guys like Dave Smith and Pierce Morgan for being crude on their show. And then this one, I mean, I'm listening to this going, yo. He was, by the way, in this episode, if you go back and listen to, it was episode 2384 of the Ben Shapiro Show, he was wildly overconfident in this. I don't know if he's always this way because I've only listened to him off and on. But man, he was just literally giggling happy with how good we were doing in Iran at this point. But his argument that they're really on their last leg, both literally in terms of this leader, but then figuratively as a country that they're this close to falling. Well, it turns out that their last leg appears to have held up pretty strong because here we are 3 months later. And he would probably, it'd be fun to go back. Maybe I'll listen to some of his stuff later and see what he's saying now because I don't listen to him at all. It'd be fun to see what he's saying now if he's just saying it's still not that long because, you notice he said it's not 12 years like Vietnam or not 12 years like, I don't know what his list was, or 12 months, but it's 12 days. Well, now it's 90 days. So where does that fall on your little, he'd probably say it's still very short and this thing is very close to being over, despite the fact that very close was 12 days and 90 days. We're still very close. Where's the metric on that? And that's kind of, I think, the complaint with this war is that there is no clear end in sight. He goes on and explains what the war goals were then, but they're so, the war goals that are stated are so broad and immeasurable that, like, I'm not going to share the clip. I don't have it saved, but there's one point where he quotes Pete Hegseth, who is saying that one of the goals, or maybe it was Marco Rubio, one or both of them were saying that one of the goals was that they would never shoot a missile again. I'm like, what kind of a goal is like? How do you guarantee? I'll tell you how you can guarantee that they don't ever shoot a missile again, but I don't think we're going that far with it. So what we were doing was not going to lead to that outcome. So, and it certainly wasn't going to lead to that outcome in 3 to 4 weeks, which we'll see that timeline come up later. But lie number one was, this is just a quagmire, or this is going to be a quagmire, and it's kind of turned out to be kind of a quagmire, at 90 days. No, Iran is not outlasting us militarily, but I don't think they're on their last leg. I mean, when he's saying this, 12 days into the war, they lasted another 78 days. So that last leg was a little bit stronger than you thought, maybe? So let's get into clip number 3 here.
Which brings us to lie number 3, which is that oil, the The oil shock is going to end this war. Iran's just going to cut off the Strait of Hormuz forever. You're going to be standing in line like the Jimmy Carter era, waiting to pump gas. Well, not exactly. You remember when, like yesterday morning, people were freaking out about the Strait of Hormuz and the supposed Iranian threat to global oil supply? And there was talk about the price of crude per barrel going up to $150, $200. Well, it was the fastest turnaround in probably modern market history because the price of oil soared by like $40 a barrel. And then by the close of business yesterday, crude had dropped again below $90 a barrel. So clearly, we're in trouble. The economy's about to collapse. That's true if you listen to the idiots.
I had to leave the clip. I think there's twice where he insults the people who, I think the first clip had one where he insults the idiots or the insane people, the insane lies that people are believing, the insane lies and the idiots who now are kind of right. Now, remember what I said? I noticed in this episode that he's prone to exaggerating his opponent's position so that he looks right. What's interesting is he went with the $150 to $200 per barrel. But I went back and I looked. I'll try to put this on screen. This is a breakdown of crude oil prices. And I made it a point. I'm not going to be able to use my cursor. So I guess I'll have to name it. So hopefully if I get this on screen, you'll see that from July 2025 till March of 2026, which is when the war started, the price of crude oil was hovering right around like $70 a barrel. And the spike that he's talking about, if you look at March, there's a huge spike and it goes all the way up. It nears it gets right below 100, okay? Just below or maybe right at 100. This episode airs, and I have 4 dots, and I'm reading them left to right. So the first dot is where it was before the war. The second dot is where it was when this podcast episode that Ben Shapiro is talking about came out. So he's saying, look, it just dropped below $90 a barrel. What are you guys worried about? The third circle is the height at which it's gotten to. It got almost to $120 a barrel. And then you can see it's kind of like stabilized in the, there was a huge dip there for a minute. And that might have been when one of the 15 times that Donald Trump said we won this war. But we're kind of settled in at right around $100 a barrel. But I think what's important to notice here is if you go back to early 2025, we were in the 60s. And now we're hovering around double that. And I think that's what we're seeing at the gas pumps. We'll talk about the gas prices here in a little bit. But so sure, we're not at $200 a barrel. We're not at $150 a barrel. But we're getting close. And no, we don't have lines of people, waiting to get gas, or it's not a complete economic breakdown, but it's also not nothing. It's double what it was. It's a genuine economic concern. And so now we're talking about the 3 insane lies the idiots told us. 90 days in, the idiots were right. I mean, sure, maybe we didn't go full idiot, right? We didn't go full insane, but he wasn't right. He's making it sound like in this episode that the trend line is going to be right back down to 70 or hover in the 80s and 90s and be not that big of a deal. What the reality is what he said is it spiked and then it dumped off right away. And he goes on to talk about how Trump's great at manipulating this and he knows exactly what he's doing. And you really think that Trump would have screwed up the oil? Like, he knows what he's doing. So what are you saying now? Like, what are you saying now? If that was a lie, what's true? Because we're now almost closer. Well, let me put it this way. We're closer to $150 a barrel than we are to the 60 we were before this war started. So who's right in that scenario, right? It kind of seems like this wasn't that much of a lie. And if you overstate your opponent's position, you're always going to be right all the time. If Ben Shapiro was right, 90 days later, we should be sitting at Memorial Day, coming into the Memorial Day weekend with cheaper gas prices because we won this war and the Strait of Hormuz was open. And that's not what's happening. So those are the 3 lies. The fourth lie, I think that he meant to reference and he never gets back to it in his episode, or I missed it, was that Donald Trump definitely has a plan. I'm not going to argue that because I think anyone can make their own assessment of that. But let's get into this fourth clip because he specifically references the Strait of Hormuz, and it's interesting to watch this clip in comparison to where we're at now.
The president also put up a statement over on Truth Social explaining his plans for the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, if Iran does anything that stops the flow of oil within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the United States of America 20 times harder than they have been hit so far.
So basically, he's citing Donald Trump. And there was a clip from Trump before this that I didn't share. I just didn't want to extenuate this too far, where Trump actually says that if we have to, we'll escort people through the Straits of Hormuz. I don't know that we're doing escorts. We basically just blocked the block. So if we can't get ships through, you can't get ships through. It's kind of like where we're at right now. I don't honestly know where we're at, but we're not perfectly open Straits of Hormuz at this point. But what I wanted to hone in on with both Donald Trump's point and Ben Shapiro's point is Trump said that if they do anything with the Strait of Hormuz, he was going to hit them 20 times harder. And what's interesting about that is, if you remember around Easter time, this was the threat, right? This was the threat back in March, that if you touch that Strait of Hormuz, we're going to hit you 20 times harder. And remember on Easter morning, they're messing with the Strait of Hormuz, and Trump comes out and just starts sending out all these crazy truths, I guess he calls them, Trump truths, threatening to do all kinds of devastation and whatever. And now we're kind of settled into this, quote, ceasefire while we make a deal, because he's not going to hit them 20 times harder. He's not. He's just not going to do it. He's obviously wants to find a way through this, but at the end of the day, all the things that Ben Shapiro is saying in this episode actually came more true than they were false. And he's not just calling these lies, he's calling them insane lies from idiots. It's like, first of all, those people obviously knew something, because all of these things, minus the fourth one, which he doesn't even talk about, so why should I? All of these things actually came more true than they didn't. So that's interesting. Now, if the war were to end tomorrow, like, not if Trump were to come out and say it was over, or to cancel it and call it a ceasefire and stop and start. If the Straits of Hormuz were perfectly open, we had a deal and everything was cleared up, and Israel stopped their fight, and you could put a clear end date on our involvement in this excursion, in this conflict. If you could do that, then he could come out and say he was right on the first one, lie number one, that this really didn't turn into a quagmire. 3 months is nothing compared to 12 or 12 months or 12 years. That would all still be true. But as it stands right now, back when he said this at 12 days, it was no closer to being done than it is now. That's the truth. And the things that he said wouldn't happen, that he was claiming as lies of other people saying would happen, are happening right now. So you look at it and you go, like, if it were to end, like, technically you're 0 for 3 on this, unfortunately. And the other side is, I think it's safe to say they were not as extreme as you were making them out to be, then they were right. And the degree to which they were right was the degree to which they took their position. So if they said, oh, I could see it getting as high as 150 is not unreasonable. It was touching 120 not a couple months ago. So 150 is like, that's a close bet when you were in the 70 to 75 range, and now you're up to 120. You were more right than Ben Shapiro was on this. So let's do one more clip, because this will get us into something both him and Mark Levin had in common.
Is anyone surprised that this is going to be a short war? If so, why? When we entered into this action in Iran, President Trump said the entire thing would last 3 to 4 weeks, which is, by the way, 2 weeks shorter than the first Gulf War, the high watermark of successful short wars, when he kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. So
this 3 to 4 weeks thing is going to come up again in my next 2 clips, but he cites Trump as saying the whole thing, right? He's making it clear that this will all be wrapped up in 3 to 4 weeks. And then he's even so confident that it's going to be wrapped up in 3 to 4 weeks that he says this will be shorter than this other high water mark in Kuwait where we kicked Saddam Hussein out. Well, guess what? You missed the high water mark, and now we're trending towards all of the lies from the insane idiots being true. Like, to some degree. Like they're definitely not true, and they're definitely not insane. And now they don't look like idiots anymore. So very interesting to go back and replay this. And let me stop for a minute and explain why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because we are constantly inundated with media and propaganda and political talking points that we lose sight of what's actually happening and what actually did happen. And the main reason I did this for my own benefit was I was listening to a lot of media that I support. And I've shared with the podcast before that one of my concerns that I'm very aware of is that my own algorithm is feeding me what I want. And so I wanted, when somebody says all the people who supported the war were saying this back then, can I validate that? Can I prove that? Can I go back and look at that? And it's not to say they're not true, but it's to go back and go, they really were saying that. And he's not hedging. Ben Shapiro in these clips, and you'll see later here with Mark Levin, they're not hedging their bets at all. They are fully confident. If you were to listen to this whole episode, fully confident. In fact, Shapiro was gleeful. I mean, he was giggling and laughing about the sinking of ships, and it's almost cringy to go back and listen to it, to be honest. That I think it's important to say, hey, were the people that I follow and support, were they accurate? And then did they walk it back? And so what I did for these clips that I just did is I wrote down, instead of 4 lies, we only got 3, but instead of 4 lies, here are 4 facts that since March 10th, when this episode came out, fact number 1, this is not a short excursion. It's nearly 3 months now with no exit strategy in sight. Now, he would say, oh, there's clearly an exit strategy. It's almost done, or something to that effect. Okay. We're nearly 3 months in. We're still doing it, and you were wrong. Fact. Fact number 2, Iran's last leg seems to be holding up. Dare I say outlasting the U.S.? There's another factor here that I don't think is being pointed out, is if Iran can continue to play this game that they're playing until January, which is not unheard of, if they can continue to play a hardball with Donald Trump, more than likely the Democrats are going to win the midterms. Then they're dealing with a Trump that becomes completely incapable of doing almost anything. All of a sudden, you've got the Democrats burying him in who knows what thing they're going to chase after him for. But you know that if they get control of the Senate, the House, they're going to hamstring anything he does for his final 2 years. And listen, Iran knows that too. So they know if they just kind of bide their time, this whole political landscape in the United States of America will shift. And then Israel, who is our ally in this thing, is going to have to take a different approach, because the Democratic House and Senate might not be so keen on this war, and they might start pulling funding and overriding Donald Trump on these things. So, like I said, Iran's last leg, this is a fact, Iran's last leg seems to be holding up. If they can just continue to do this, they've outlasted us in reality. Fact number 3, oil prices have nearly doubled and continue to rise. I put in here February 26th, oil prices were $67 a barrel. In April, it was $110 a barrel. So we're looking at nearly double. So no, is it as bad as he said, that they said it would be? No, but it's worse than you said it was going to be. So is it really a lie? And then fact number 4, it has lasted. Not 3 to 4 weeks, but now we're closing in on 3 months, which is 3 times the March 10th estimate that was stated here in this episode. So there's no clear ending in sight. Iran is beat up, battered, but they were then too. If you listen to this whole episode, he talks about how they're completely destroyed and this is almost over. It's not almost over. It wasn't almost over then. And as far as we can tell, it's not almost over now. So now what I want to do, so that was Ben Shapiro, March 10th, 2026. That was his thoughts on the war and where we were headed. And at the time, everyone thought this would be over in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, right? It's not over. So I thought, okay, let's look at one other person who would be in support of the war, and who better? Because now you're seeing, if you're following politics at all, now you're seeing the legacy media, the war hawk Trump support, the war Trump supporters, whatever. They're all turning on people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. You've heard this from all of them, right? All these people are being thrown under the bus. They feel like they were the little bit that it took to get them over. Now they're turning on them. But one person that Donald Trump hasn't turned on is Mark Levin. In fact, he's promoting him, thinks he's a great guy. I'm going to be honest. I've heard of Mark Levin. I've never listened to him. And so I thought, Ben Shapiro, who I've heard of and I know supports the war, and another person that I know is probably supporting the war is Mark Levin. Never listened to him. So let's pull up one of his episodes. And boy, I'll tell you, before, I don't want to poison the well too much because the clips speak for themselves, but his intro is wild. It's wild. It's like from the bunker of whatever. And then there's, I can't remember, I think it's the national anthem, but it's like the old Republic, like flutes and drums and stuff like that. And then it talks about like, now let's hear from our leader, Mark Levin. I mean, it's really, I hope it might be sarcastic. Like that might be the intent of it, but boy, whew, I was listening to it going, oh, I didn't expect this. It's like, okay. And let me put it this way. This is one of the reasons I realized that when what happened with Thomas Massie, because I prepped all this beforehand, the Thomas Massie thing came out and I'm like, yo, this appeals to boomers big time. This, like, if you listen to this, by the way, I got to throw this in there. I wasn't going to, I deleted it, but I have to say it. Every like 15 minutes of his 2-hour episode, which it seems like he's got like a podcast 15 minutes and then like I don't know how his radio show's broken up, but like most of it on his podcast, Spotify stream is his radio show. And then he's got like a podcast segment. It's kind of weird. I get what he's doing there, but he literally talks about the podcast segment in the radio segment. It's very weird, but it's almost like he's talking to his boomer audience later in the episode, which is just like, it's interesting. Like, I highly encourage it. But anyway, this was March 10th, 2026. Mark Levin. This is the title of the episode: America's Role in Shaping Iran's Future. Like, how can you be? Well, these are the people who are still claiming to be like America first, make America great again, like America first. Now, the jab on them is that they're more concerned with Israel than they are with America. Imagine having an entire episode talking about America's role in shaping Iran's future. The whole thing was that we wanted to be out of these foreign wars and focus on the U.S. That was the whole thing. That was like the whole thing. And now the way they would spin that is to say if Iran has a nuclear weapon, then the U.S. has no future. So that's how they would look at that. So in their minds, this is still America first. I get it. But okay, let's look at some of these clips. I've only got 2. They're a little bit longer than those Ben Shapiro ones, but I think I still kept them under a minute. So here's clip number 1.
But I hear an awful lot of pressure, endless news reports on the price of gasoline. We didn't have endless news reports on the price of gasoline when it was far more expensive than it is today as a result of climate change ideology and religion. When they were shutting down leases, shutting down drilling sites, shutting down federal lands, making it difficult, very difficult, to produce oil domestically and to refine it. We didn't have those charts popping up showing us day by day how much the price of gasoline was going up. It's almost $5 a gallon for a premium. Almost $5 a gallon. And they drove up the price of automobiles by like $4,000 or $5,000. Remember all that? The expenses were enormous.
I love that. That clip is priceless, man. First of all, if you listen to this full episode of Mark Levin, Trump, the way Trump talks makes a lot of sense. It's almost like Trump, I don't know. I had never listened to Mark Levin, and when I listened to this episode, I was like, I get where Trump's getting it from. Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. I was listening to it going, let me tell you something that he does in this episode is he has like a funny name for people he doesn't like the woke Reich, and he thinks he's like creative and making these jokes, and then Trump does the same thing. He comes up with like silly names, and I don't know if one's copying the other or vice versa. But man, I'll tell you. But this clip, man, that's priceless. So what he's talking about is, I don't remember anyone talking about how high the gas price, or I don't remember endless news reports of how high the gas prices were when the Democrats were doing it. And I'm like, bro, for sure they were. For sure they were. It was definitely a big talking point. No, they weren't endless reports, but the charts were out there. But speaking of the charts, I guess I get to be one of those guys who brings up the charts. But dude says, he says, he says, sorry, I'm trying to see something on my chart. He says that the cost of premium was $5 a gallon. Remember how expensive it was? It was insane how expensive it was. And I'm showing you, this graph that I'm showing you is actually regular gasoline. But ironically, his statement is about premium gasoline, which I think on average right now is around $5.20. So it's higher than what he references. But what I'm showing you here, and this is almost identical to the crude oil chart that I showed a minute ago, or a couple minutes ago in the Ben Shapiro segment. But gas prices followed obviously the same trend as the crude oil, where we're now at a national average of about $3.50 a gallon. I think right now it's probably more in the $4 range for most people. No, I think this is right. It's like $3.50, but I think we're headed towards $4. Is that right? Now I feel like my numbers are off. You know what it was? I was comparing. That's right. I was comparing premium earlier. That's where I had the premium gas averages at like $5.20. I don't know. I'm getting anything from $5.40, $5.20, something like that. But regular is hovering right around $3.50. But it's gotten as high as $3.75. I know where I'm at right now. It's $3.63, I think it is. But the point being that he's sitting here talking about how at the time he's saying this, gas prices weren't that high. And he doesn't think they're going to get any higher. And I did the same thing on this chart as I did with Ben Shapiro's. When he's talking about this, it's hovering right around $2.50, $2.60 a gallon. And he's basically saying it's not that bad, guys. It's only a little higher. You know, it went from like $2 a gallon up to $2.60. 60 cents a gallon. No big deal. But now, 90 days later, we're sitting on nearly $3.75. It's gone up $1 a gallon. It's one of the biggest talking points right now in terms of elections, because we know that gasoline prices affect elections. It's a known fact that that's an issue. So his comment about the premium just had me rolling, because it's like, when he's saying this, he's basically arguing that gas isn't even anywhere close to where the Democrats got it to. And now, 90 days later, it's getting pretty darn close to where it was. In fact, for premium, it's up there. And again, I don't listen to his show. I'd have to go listen to another episode of his like now to see what he's saying about gas prices and them jumping. He's probably saying it's worth it. We got to get this war done. He definitely would be saying that. So basically what he's saying is the cost of gas wasn't that bad, and it's not gonna get any higher because this war is basically over. So now let's listen to the second clip here. And these two clips were right around the 8 to 10 minute mark, so you can just go there and listen to them straight through. I only cut them for two reasons. One, I don't want to use the long clips from other people's episodes. But number two, I wanted to focus specifically on these two things. So,
and this is temporary. It's temporary. There's plenty of oil, but the world is worried about what happens to the Straits, where 20% of the oil passes. Not 20% of our oil, but there's a world market out there. That would be temporary, especially if the Iranian regime and its entrails were eliminated. The Straits would be wide open. I'm just cautioning you now because I heard almost a complete change in tone. It could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to where we're pretty much done. We'll be out of there soon enough. And we'll see.
So this was a very interesting clip because it references two things that I think are important. First, if we win militarily, is what he's saying, Iran and their entrails, which whatever that is, if we win militarily, the straits will just open up. And if you remember, it'd be funny to go back and compare Mark Levin quotes to Donald Trump quotes, because Donald Trump, if you remember, he was saying, I think he said something like if the other countries would participate or attack them or do something, then the straits would just naturally open up. There was like a week or two where he was saying, they're just going to open up. It's just going to open up. That's what he's saying. Now, what's interesting about this particular clip, not only did the Straits of Hormuz not just open up, at this point, they didn't even think they were going to block them, but he is taking a strange position. So you heard with Ben Shapiro that Trump was saying 3 to 4 weeks, and Ben Shapiro takes the position that the war's basically over. We got a little bit of cleanup to do, but this thing's done. This thing's done faster than Trump even originally said. We're only 12 days in, and he's basically calling it. Mark Levin is concerned in this episode that we're not going to go far enough, because he's saying originally we were talking 3, 4, or 5 weeks to get this done, and now I'm hearing people say that it's already over, and they're walking it back. He's like, if you go back and listen to this, he wants to stay in longer to get the job done. That's the whole premise of this episode for him. Like, we need to stay there and make sure we set up a regime and make sure things are set up that are beneficial to the United States of America. So Mark Levin in this episode is sort of like saddened by the fact that we might be close to winning this thing. He thinks people are walking it back because of political pressure. He wants us to stay there longer, but even he is saying 3, 4, or 5 weeks, and he's concerned that people are saying it's basically already over, and he got his wish. It wasn't over. It's not over. It's continuing. And it's interesting to go back and listen to what people were saying who were in support of this war after 12 days. Shapiro and Levin kind of give you an idea. But at the end of the day, whether it's Ben Shapiro's 4 lies, which ended up being at least half truths, maybe some of them full truth, and Mark Levin talking about how crazy the gas prices were, well, look at where we're at now. The Straits of Hormuz are not open. The gas prices are $5 a gallon for premium. It's crazy. You're right. And we weren't done. It's gone way beyond 3 to 4 weeks. Now, it'd be interesting to go back and listen to his stuff, because he's probably happy that this has continued. His view is probably that we need to stay there as long as it takes. That's probably, based on what I heard from his 2-hour episode, that's probably where his position is. All of that to say this. My uncredible take, as I look back, as I do a rewind on where we are now versus what people were saying, listen broadly. Listen broadly. Listen to opinions you don't agree with. Listen to people you don't believe in. Don't just listen to what people you follow are saying. When your favorite news reporter, your favorite podcaster says, remember when they were saying this, and you don't actually remember that, take the time to look it up. See if that's what they were actually saying. Because if you're listening to Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin, both of them are prone to exaggeration against their opponent. I'm sure everybody is on some level. But if you go back and listen to what they were saying, you can ask this question. Were they right? Just a few months ago, were they right? Were the people who said that the lies that Ben Shapiro claimed were being said, were they lying? Were they accurate in their assessment? We know they're confident in it. Were they accurate? And more importantly, have they admitted they were wrong? Have they walked back some of these statements? Have they pivoted, or have they doubled down? And I think as we head more and more into a AI world and an algorithmic world, people are going to continue to be fed what they want to hear. And I think the only way to remain critical and objective is to listen broadly, listen widely. And I think what I'm going to start adding to my normal routine is to go back and listen back to what people were saying. And even as I did this like little sort of research project, if you will, all I did was listen to 2 podcasts from 3 months ago. But I now think that I probably ought to do something similar, at least for my own benefit, not necessarily for the podcast, but for my own benefit. Take the people that I listen to and go back to this exact same date, time frame, and see what they were saying. And confirm if what they were saying is true, accurate, or if it's not. It's important that we question ourselves and question the things we listen to. I think that's the only way that we can get true and honest information. So we can get to the truth. And so many people, there's so much content, there's so much AI generated content, and the algorithm is so good at giving us what we like that we almost have to be super intentional about kind of breaking our own algorithm and getting outside of it and looking for other sources of information. I'm going to tell you right now, I have heard people trash Mark Levin. I've heard people talk about Shapiro. I've listened to Shapiro before. I'd listened this time with a different lens, just by going back a few months on a topic. Mark Levin I've never heard of, never listened to it. It was totally different than I thought. And I'm telling you, it woke me up, not in a good way. It gave me new perspective on, oh, this is what they're listening to? So, and it got me thinking, like, because I would call myself a libertarian leaning. I was Republican, but now I can't. There's just so much stuff that's crazy to me for the Republicans, and I'm definitely not a Democrat. Ever, never, never. And I'm in this political world where I look at this and I go, I don't think either side is regularly or honestly listening to what the other side is listening to. They're just talking at each other. And that's why I like Piers Morgan Uncensored, because you get to see at least people, they're a little crazy on that show, but you get to at least hear the other position and where they're coming from, and then maybe follow that thread. But yeah, take the time to go and listen to something you've never listened to and hear what it is, and try to strip your biases away from it so that you can be as objective as possible. I know listening to Shapiro didn't bother me. I was just like, man, I honed in on some things that I thought, man, he's a lot more crude than I remember him being. Maybe it was just that episode. Also, very cavalier when talking about death. And one of the things I like about Dave Smith's podcast, part of the problem, is that love or hate him, he can be crass too. I don't have any problem with it being crass, but he cares about loss of life. Listening to Shapiro joke about ships being destroyed, I was just kind of screwed up, to be honest, but like from my perspective. But the point is, my uncredible take, my look at the news is, if you're listening to a podcast, every now and again, break away from your normal routine and listen to something that doesn't agree with you. And if for no other reason than to confirm your bias, right? Go into it and go, what did they actually say in this scenario? What were their words? Not what am I being told they said, but what did they actually say? And do I agree with it? Was it embellished a little bit? Did the person I listened to create create a straw man and then beat it up? Did they inflate what they were saying to make them look stupid when they weren't really saying that? So just listen widely. And I really think it's beneficial, especially now with the way the media moves so quickly, to take some time and to just go back a month or two. Pick a date. What I did for this is I said, okay, when did this war start? When would people have been likely confident that it was over? And then I picked a date from Shapiro, and then I picked the same date for Levin, and I just ran with it. And it was a very interesting case study, and hopefully it was beneficial to you as well here. But I think it's worth doing, even if it's with your own podcast that you like to listen to, the things that you enjoy. Go back and listen to some of the old stuff. It's kind of educational. All right, I am going to speed through these last 2 sections. We spent a lot of time on the news. Our main topic, I'm only going to talk about it briefly because it's been something that's on my mind. This is probably going to be an Uncredible Substack post as well down the road. But our main topic through an Uncredible lens is I wanted to discuss fear and anxiety as it relates to running, and something that I've been learning lately as I've been running, and I think this applies to other areas of life as well, is you can't run. Your fear and your anxiety can only carry you so far in running. And one of the things I'm noticing is I have real physical, genuine physical responses to my body being put under stress. And so what I mean by that is like my first mile, I've really been evaluating that first mile because my heart rate spikes. It's when I have a real hard time with dry mouth and breathing and all those things. And then with most runners, it settles down. For me, it takes about 1 mile to 2 miles to where I get into a rhythm. But what I've noticed is my body is reacting to the stress of running, and it's communicating to me something that my mind is doing, I think. I think my mind is, when I start to run, my perception of running is hard. And so I think this is hard. And I think that's what causes, I mean, obviously you're starting up and your body's changing into a different rhythm, but it's almost as if I am speeding up in my head, not so much my body, and that's causing these physiological responses. I'm not sure how true it is, but what I've noticed is when I slow down in my perception, in my head, and focus on getting those things right. So like if my mouth is dry or I'm having a hard time breathing, if I slow down in a way that makes me feel better in those areas, my pace does not get affected that much. And what that means is my mind, I said that kind of weird. My mind is perceiving my effort, especially early on, as being way harder than it really is. Like to me, running this pace requires this much effort, and it doesn't, right? And part of that is I'm getting more physically fit as I do these training blocks and as I run marathons and half marathons, whatever. That's part of it. But I think the other part of it is like, I think there's a limit to where that rage and that anxiety and that to how far that can take us. To where our heightened sense of like, let's go, let's get it. And I noticed it when I was lifting before, and I've noticed it now with running, is like, you can't will yourself to a 20-mile PR or a 26-mile PR. You can't do that. It's really the opposite of what you would normally think. And what I put in my notes was you have to almost slow down in order to speed up. And this is definitely true in running. You'll hear other runners say this both with training and, I was just listening to the Buffalo Marathon podcast, and they're telling you those first 2 miles, just settle in. Just settle in. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot weighing on you. Don't go out too hard. Don't go out too fast. And I don't think that only means physically. I think it also means mentally. And I was thinking about this past week, and I was going to make it the main topic. And I was like, that's not only true in running, but it's also true in life. When you feel your body start to ramp up, for me, it's sweating, it's breathing heavy, it's my mind just starts speeding up, and I start thinking of how I'm going to respond to a situation. Focusing on some of the basics like breathing and taking a drink and just calming down and telling yourself that this situation is not as bad as maybe you perceive it to be. I think that's important both in running and in life. And it's something I'm really working hard at. But the whole point of this really short main topic is when I started running, I wanted to run fast. So I thought aggressively, like, let's go, let's get it. And I'm learning that keeping my thoughts calm and collected is actually the pathway to success in what I'm trying to do in terms of running marathons and half marathons, get faster. And I'm also kind of learning that this has application in life as well. That when life starts to come at you really fast, and when things start to get really hard, you have to be very intentional about listening to your physiological responses and calming them down. Are you holding your breath? Is your heart rate rising? How do I slow my heart rate? Take deep breaths and things like that. So all that to say, anxiety, fear, those emotions can only get you so far. Adrenaline, very effective in the short term. But in the long term, which life is a long-term game, there has to be another strategy. And I guess we'll see on Sunday when I run this marathon if I've gotten to a place where I can calm my thoughts and actually translate this into anything real world. But what I've noticed in some of my shorter runs, particularly lately where I've been trying to heal as well as slow down, is that I don't lose a whole lot of time when I slow down mentally. When I go out on a run and I say, I'm just going to take it easy, I don't lose a lot of time. I just don't. And I'm starting to realize that in life as well, you don't lose a lot when you think you've lost a tiny little battle in life. It feels like the whole world is coming in. It could be a loss of a job. It could be all kinds of things. But like you start to learn that those things maybe aren't as big as you're making them out to be. And maybe the adrenaline rush and the fight that you're trying to win doesn't need to all be fought in one moment. That you can win this battle. Like I look at this marathon. I can't PR a marathon in the first 2 miles. I have to do it over time. And that means slowing down and spreading out my energy and being very aware of how I'm using my energy throughout that marathon. So that's our main topic, looking at the world through an uncredible lens. Sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. All right, now let's get into our podcast feature. This is a repeat podcast feature. This is the Cerebral Paulsy podcast. The Cerebral Paulsy Perspective with Chad Williams and Daryl Perry. These guys were the first. By the way, I butchered their names the first time too, and I was very intentional about not doing that this time. But Chad Williams, Daryl Perry, very good friends on Instagram. I say very good friends. We have, when you're on Instagram or social media and you're dealing with people you don't actually know, you've never actually really met, there's like the people that are like acquaintances where it's like a follow, a good job, a fist bump. And then there's the people that you interact with on a fairly regular basis. And when you see their post and then you respond to it, there's sort of an underlying respect and appreciation for that person. And, these two guys, when I first did the podcast feature, I don't know if it was episode 0 or 1, I put them in there. And I've kind of decided to start going back and revisiting some of the earlier podcasts from the episode. And they just launched this episode, which I think what's crazy is I think their episodes are tracking pretty closely with mine. This might be 17 or 18 of their episode, and this is our episode 18. But this is from their most recent episode where they're talking about strength. And I thought in conjunction with the main topic we just talked about and with where the quote of the week is going to lead us, I thought this was really powerful. And I think it's good to think about what strength really is. And they give a really good perspective on this. So here's a clip from the Cerebral Palsy Perspective podcast.
Completely different. Because you've been there before. Not a lot of times. You've been there a lot now.
Yeah.
The other thing, I was thinking about this when you were asking about what strength is. I think sometimes, because I've dealt with it. I know that you and I have talked about it before. I know a lot of other people deal with it too. Sometimes strength is making it through the day and realizing tomorrow can be better. And that takes on a whole different meaning for each person, but I think it's important to say that too.
No, absolutely. I love that. And I think, just being able to pick yourself up and push forward and have that mindset that like tomorrow will be a better day. There's so many different layers to it. So I hope the different angles that we talked about and the different perspectives that we brought to it, I hope that is meaningful for our listeners. I hope that brings them, some value. I hope.
Really, really appreciated that clip and that whole episode. Just sometimes strength really is just getting through the next day. It really is. And just a really powerful episode when you consider their challenges with cerebral palsy and what they're facing. Gives you a little bit of perspective on what's hard, what's easy, what's strong, what's not, what's fast in running and what's not fast. But yeah, I mean, what does it mean to be strong? Something to really take a moment and think about. Check out their episode. It was only like 22, 23 minutes long, and just a really great discussion about what is strength. And it has a lot of different interpretations, I think, when you start thinking about it. All right, let's wrap things up with our quote of the week. And I have a pile of them here, not because I'm going to use them, but that's this quote this week came out early in the week, and so I've got the rest of them underneath it. But our quote of the week this week is from Kristen Butler. Don't forget, while you're busy doubting yourself, someone else is admiring your strength. Don't forget, while you're busy doubting yourself, someone else is admiring your strength. So I picked this out, and I really appreciated the quote in general. It's something I think about a lot based on where I've come from in my own journey, but also a couple days later, somebody on Instagram direct messaged me and was like, dude, your progress is so inspiring. And when he said it, I was like, I'm a sarcastic pessimist person by nature. I didn't believe he was serious. And so I went and I looked up listen, people say things on social media all the time to encourage you, and sometimes it's meaningful and sometimes it's just like a fist bump, like keep going. But this is a gentleman who's just started his journey running 1 or 2 miles at a time, 4 or 5, I don't know. I just scrolled through a few of his things. He run 12, 13-minute miles. It's literally where I remember myself a few years ago, just literally. And here I am now. I look at 9-minute miles as okay. Boy, it'd be really nice to be in the 8s as much as possible. 10-minute miles feel sluggish and slow to me now. Where back then, where he's probably at, 12-minute, 11-minute miles probably feels great. But just remember, and this is one of the reasons you see people complaining about other people posting on social media, just remember that the reason you don't have to be an elite athlete to inspire somebody. You just have to be consistent in what you're doing and growing. Because there's always going to be somebody who's one step ahead of you in anything, whether it's running, sports, intellect, strength, lifting, all those things. There's always going to be that person who's 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. And then there's always going to be that person who's elite, the top of their game. But with that number of people that are ahead of you, there's just as many or maybe even more who are behind you looking at you going, how do you do that? You, from their perspective, are 1 or 2 steps ahead. And it doesn't have to be a competition all the time. You can inspire people who are not where you're at. You can inspire the person. Like if you just started walking yesterday and you're putting your shoes on, you're going out there, you can inspire the person who hasn't worked up the gumption to get out there and walk. If you've been walking for a year and you just started jogging, you can inspire the person who can't seem to go that far. And you don't have to be somebody like Rachel Entrekin and set the course record at Cocodona of a 250-mile race in order to inspire somebody. No matter where you're at, and this is the beauty, I think, of social media, is that no matter where you're at in your journey, you can inspire somebody, and hopefully knowing that inspires you to go and do those things, to share those things and actually do the things that might inspire somebody else. So yeah, that's our quote of the week. Don't forget, while you're busy doubting yourself, someone else is admiring your strength. It's been a long episode. Let's close things out. Thanks for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Reminder, if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, like the episode, subscribe to the podcast. All that stuff goes a long way with the algorithms. Remember to subscribe on the Substack. Really, I'm investing a lot of time in the Substack right now. It's free. Uncredible.me. Links in the show notes. My Instagram posts, I'm not shifting them away, but I'm moving as many of those as I can over to Substack as well. So it's basically going to be If you're on the Substack, you get all of it. If you're on Instagram, you just get the social posts and a few clips here and there. So the podcast, the articles, the posts, the notes, whatever they're called in Substack, all of it is on the Substack. So keep checking that out. For Uncredible merch, check out merch.uncredible.me. Again, link in the show notes. This shirt, podcast shirt, this is not my favorite. I got the cheap shirt for this. I should have gotten the more expensive one. This logo on a black shirt would be fire. I just haven't gotten it yet. This one, I like it, but I think I would have preferred it on black. And then if you're not following me on Instagram, check me out at Jeremy Lundmark. Again, link in the show notes. And as always, thanks for watching and for listening. And remember, stay uncredible.